Bonjour and welcome to WTF France, the weekly podcast in which we explain WTF happened in French politics in the last 7 days. I am your co-host Juliette.
And I am Pepijn, the other host. It's the 28th of September and this is the third month we're doing this. And now finally I've been hearing from you all this week that France has, we already had a prime minister in France, old news. But there is now a formal, proper government with all professional people.
I know, we have a government. It took nearly 3 months, but it's here. It's, big. It took 3 months is a very long time for a French government. Like I know our neighbors, specifically Belgium, probably are used to much longer to get a government. 3 months is impossibly long for French politics. But yeah, now here it is. Here we are. So I guess we know what we can talk about this week.
Yeah, that is nice. But should we discuss the government then? Should we go through go through the ministers?
We are definitely going to talk about the government, but we are not going to talk about every minister and secretary of state and member of government because there are 41 of them.
What? There really are 41?
41. 42 if you include Barnier, actually.
41?
Yes. So
what's the point of that?
So everyone feels special? Actually, funnily enough, until last night, there were 39. And then they added 2 more because there were a couple areas that went like, we don't have a minister. You forgot about us. Specifically, there's for a long time being a secretary of state for people with handicap. And that disappeared. 2 weeks after the end of the Paralympics, just didn't look good. And then there was also...
Still doesn't look good.
And there was also, they missed having a Secretary of State for Army veterans. So yeah, 41. So we are not going to go through everyone. Just to explain a little bit, in French government, I don't know other countries, but there's basically 3 seniority.
There are other countries, yes.
There are other countries. There are 3 seniority levels in a French government. There's full minister, there is delegate minister, and then Secretary of State. It's funny, like in the US, Secretary of State is the most important person in the government aside from the president. In France, it's like you got a job because you knew someone and you got to feel important, but it's not a very big deal. So yeah, not introducing everyone, but like starting maybe with the big picture. This is, it will shock you to find out, a very right-wing government. In many ways, we see the imprint of the extreme right. There's several ministers that I'm going to mention where you're like, oh, that's where Marine Le Pen got to input.
We're not going to discuss everyone, but let's at least start with the important ones then, I guess.
Now, let's start with someone not important, actually.
Oh, that's...
We're going to start with the Secretary of State. And the reason isn't because this person is particularly important, but it's because it's quite a reflection on where the whole government is at. So I want to start with a man called Othman Nasrou. And he is the Secretary of State for Citizenship and Combating Discrimination. And the reason I want to talk about him specifically is because he has a very ironic position for someone who's supposed to combat discrimination.
So just one issue? I'm not going to ask more, but just one issue?
No, more than one issue.
Tell me.
So this is a government overall that is full of people who have voted against marriage equality when it was introduced in France more than a decade ago. And Othman Nasrou is one of the people who voted against marriage equality. And now he is minister
against discriminations.
Against discriminations.
Well, I guess if it's not a law, it's not something you can discriminate on, or no, that's not how reality works.
No, it's not.
I see the problem.
And there are a lot of people in this government who have voted against marriage equality because this is a right-wing government, and the right en masse in 2013, when this came through, had opposed marriage equality, and they haven't been in government since then. So this is the first time they get to be in government since that happened, and now it's coming through again, like it's reminding everyone this was your position. I mean, Barnier even voted against decriminalizing homosexuality in the 80s. This is where you start to get the feel of how over decades your old positions will continue to surface and to be what people judge you on. When marriage equality passed, that was under Hollande, he was president, it was a really, really big deal. There were demonstrations in the streets against marriage equality. Like people were like, a family is a mom and dad. Like you need a mom and a dad in a family. And
also, these people never divorce.
definitely not. And so
it will be interesting to go to the list of 41 people there.
Now that it's been a decade and everyone is like, I don't know why anyone ever made a big deal about this. Like it sort of became entrenched very, very fast. And they all look really silly for having voted against it. But they did. They very much did. That's a choice they made more than 10 years ago.
But what's that what you mean with the very right wing then?
Yeah, that's one of the things. So like on social issues, very, very right wing. And then there's like the security angle. And let's move to other people in the government, the actual heavyweights in the government.
Okay, 1 done, 40 to go.
This
will be a 6-hour podcast.
At the interior, we now have a man called Bruno Retailleau. He is definitely someone who owes his job to Marine Le Pen. He's extremely anti-immigration. He's very focused on policing. And at his first policing.
Oh, yeah.
At his first press conference, he said his top 3 priorities were going to be restore order, and restore order.
Oh, God.
Sorry, that just sounds so stupid.
He sounds like a righteous a-hole. Yeah, we ought to have a special word for so-called leaders whose rhetoric is so limited that they have to repeat the same words to make some point. Because it's really...
And
if you're in a presentation and someone says we need to grow business, you're like, no, dude, come up with a...
Yeah, and it's always on that side. So you never have like a minister for gender equality who's like, defeat the patriarchy. They're
more gender.
It's always the same kind of dudes who make those comments.
Yeah, we automatically also say dudes, actually. But that's not true, because there's also Marine Le Pen, who's not a dude. Are there others who owe their jobs to Marine Le Pen?
Probably a few. No one quite as clear as Bruno Retailleau. Though actually, there's one minister who already got in a tiff with Marine Le Pen, and that's the new Minister for Economy. His name is Antoine Armand. And he first said when he joined the government that he was going to invite all representatives from what we call the Republican arc, which is a very fancy way of saying not the fascists. And he was told off by Barnier very publicly, like newspaper headline publicly, that he had to talk to the extreme right. And that it's not acceptable in this government not to talk to the extreme right.
Wow. And it's the economy minister, so that's quite an important one, I guess.
It's important, but actually it got downgraded a little bit. Traditionally, you're minister for economy, finance, and budget. But now there's one minister for economy and finance and one minister for budget. His name is Laurent Saint-Martin. That's quite unusual, actually. My assumption is because of how bad the budget situation is. He wants to keep that specific issue close to him. And so Laurent Saint-Martin is ministre auprès du Premier Ministre, which means he is minister to the Prime Minister. Really what it means, he's probably going to spend more time in Barnier's office than in his own office.
Is it like assistant to the assistant manager?
No, this is actually an important job.
Okay, okay.
This is actually going to matter.
Okay, he's not assistant. He is the assistant manager in a way.
He is the manager.
He's the manager, and then...
But the CEO is keeping him close to him.
Doesn't really work, I'd say, yeah. So, you've only mentioned men so far. Is this a very male-dominated government?
It's not, actually. It's quite well gender-balanced. I think we're nearly 50-50. So I guess that's good. Yay, progress.
So... should we talk about some of those? No, not those.
Those what? Continue that sentence. I dare you.
Women. No. So should we talk about some of the women in this government?
Yes, let's do a few, at least one. I think you're going to really enjoy this. And by enjoy this, I mean be outraged. The Minister for Education, her name is Genetet. She has zero experience whatsoever in education, so that's always a good start.
Yeah.
She's a Macronist.
She's a fresh new look.
Yeah, that's probably how they're going to try to pitch it. She's a Macronist through and through. She's from Macron's party. She's actually trained as a doctor, but she hasn't been a doctor for a very long time. she's had a lot of jobs before she was elected in parliament a few years ago. None of them related to education, mind you. And she was elected as deputy in one of the French people abroad constituencies, specifically the one covering Asia, not the one where we live.
Okay.
And this is where it gets interesting, because where she lived at that time was in Singapore. And then she started her own company. And her company was focused on helping people, specifically expats, manage their domestic workers.
Helping people, specifically expats, manage that is the most expat-y thing I've ever heard.
I know, like the worst kind of expat.
It's a person who would never think of themselves as a migrant or a temporary foreign worker.
Yeah. Immigrants are brown people. White people get to be expats, like that kind of framing.
Yeah.
As part of that, she would like give advice. That was what she focused on. And some people have dug up a little bit the kind of advice she would give. And one of the things that really is standing out is she would tell people, don't hire a maid who has been employed by Westerners before, because then she might be a little bit too strong-willed.
What?
Yeah. So
she told people not to hire maids who had been employed by Westerners before?
Yes.
As they may be a bit too strong-willed.
Something like that,
That is... Wow. That is a disgusting view on life. Wow.
I wonder if it's something like that generation after generation, these are the tips that expats give each other.
I'm not in that WhatsApp group.
No.
Don't add me.
Please don't add me either. I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups already and it's becoming unsustainable. Anyway, so
I don't think that's the...
You don't think that's the problem?
I don't think that's the problem. Also, I don't have WhatsApp, so... Anyway.
So that was Anne Genetet. You want to talk about more of those women people? So
what a horrible person. Let's move on.
Let's do another of these women people. Let's talk about Catherine Vautrin. So she's the second ranking in the government. She's pretty high up. She's one of those people who voted against gay marriage. Like it's going to be something that comes up a lot. Specifically, she had a problem with same-sex parents. So she thought homosexual couples should not adopt because that messes up what a family is.
Will she be Minister of Families?
I'm really glad she's not at family. No, she will be actually doing something completely different. She is focused on working closely with the local communities and like the partnership of growing the power outside of Paris. Decentralization. Yeah.
Well, and how does she describe it? Like making local communities more racist?
She has not talked specifically about it yet.
So she's second ranking. Who is first ranking? Sorry for being very cynical, but expat lady there really got me quite annoyed. So she's second ranking. Who's first ranking?
That is the new Minister for Justice. His name is Didier Migaud. He actually seems to be one of the more decent people in the government. His previous job was he was the head of a government organization that focuses on transparency in public affairs. That's where people would declare, for instance, once you've just been elected, you need to declare your, like what do you own, how much money do you have, where are your interests. So that's what they control. And he is a former member of the Socialist Party. And that seems to be the closest thing that Barnier could get to a left-wing minister.
Is he actually left-wing?
So yeah, I think he's sort of actually left-wing. Like he left the Socialist Party, but there wasn't out of a big fight. He left because he was joining an independent body called La Cour des Comptes, which is overseeing public finances. And you need to be independent to do that.
Okay.
So he didn't leave with like hard feelings with anyone, and no one seems outraged by his nomination. So I think that's good job on this one, Barnier. And he has a lot of work ahead of him because there is a growing discussion that's going to be something that he has to work on rape culture and the definition of rape.
So this is, I guess, very much linked to the very public rape trial that's going on right now in the north of France?
The south of France.
The south of France.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So backing up a bit, because I don't know that all our listeners know about this, we need to talk about the Mazan rape trial. Mazan is a town in the south of France where a horrible crime was discovered in 2020. There was a man who had been drugging his wife with sleep-inducing medication and inviting other men to come at their home and rape her, and filmed it all. He found 90 people total.
Yeah.
And since this has been found out, they managed to identify 50 of them.
And it's been going on for many years. This was not in 2020. This was a span of 10, 15 years maybe.
I think for a decade he'd been doing that.
This is really a horrible story, and we haven't really talked about it on the podcast, but it has been a pretty big deal in France, also politically, right?
Yeah, so the trial has been taking place for about 3 weeks now, or 4 weeks. And I haven't brought it up in this podcast, even though I've actually been following this very closely. And the reason is, in this podcast, we tend to do quite a bit of political football, and we mock people, and we joke around. And I think this woman, Gisèle Pelicot is her name, she deserves better. She deserves better than being objectified, because she's already been objectified so horribly to a point I want to throw up sometimes when I read what's been happening and I read the transcripts from the trial. But she chose to make the trial public. She had completely the option to say, I want this to be behind closed doors, and it would have been granted. But she made that choice because she knew that this could start a conversation about rape culture in France.
And why is this needed in France? Like, I know it's a leading question maybe, but why is it needed in France?
I think it's not needed just in France. It's needed in a lot of places. Like the rape culture, like that tendency to blame women for the crimes that they are the victim of. Their habit of diminishing the importance of what happened to them. Like, oh, was it really that terrible? Was your skirt too short? This is not uniquely French, but it's coming to light a lot in France right now. Some of the people accused of raping her have said that because her husband said it was fine to have sex with her, then it's not rape because the husband said so. Christ. Like it's really kind of removing a lot of agency from women. And the fact that so many men did this, that husband, that man could find so many men willing to do this, is really bringing to light the fact that this is embedded in society. These aren't like men hiding in dark corners ready to jump on women. It's a thing that's through all of society.
No, it was the local mailman, it was a train driver, it was a policeman, a local cop, it was a person from the bakery, guy from the bakery. It was someone from a supermarket. It was a lawyer, I think.
I don't think a lawyer, but
anyway.
It was
a local politician.
There's a lot of people. And I want to be clear.
What a shit show.
Yeah. Gisèle Pelicot is receiving an overwhelming amount of support. She's not on her own anymore. She was for a while, but she's not. And it's really creating this societal need to discuss what consent means. Because for many people, consent is the absence of no, but I don't think that's true. Consent means that the person you're having sexual relations with said yes explicitly. It's not just the absence of no.
Yeah. I guess it's not obvious to everyone.
No, unfortunately.
And that needs to change, of course.
And so that's where we get to the legal part. Some people are saying we need the law to change and to have in the law the lack of explicit consent be the criteria for rape.
So talking about changing the law and to having lack of consent be a criteria for rape, do you think that would work?
I'm not sure, because the law is not perfect. There's some issues with it, but I don't think what we're facing really is a legal problem. Like, rape has been illegal in France for a very long time, but it's still happening. What we're having is a cultural problem where a lot of people, specifically teenage boys and then who grew up into men, don't understand very deeply in themselves what it means to get consent for having sex. And until we solve that, we can have as many legal changes as we want. Rape is going to continue to happen because it's a cultural problem, not just a legal one. So yeah, change the law, it's fine. I don't think it would hurt much, but that's not where I would be focusing right now.
Okay. I don't have anything to add to that. We're coming to the end of the podcast. So we do a nice thing usually then.
Yeah.
I think let's find a nice thing.
So this one,
News about animals.
no. This is not like a nice news story. It's a nice podcast for us story. Someone submitted an idea a couple of weeks ago to have a special outtake podcast on France and its relation to Africa. Now, to be clear, I don't think I can do that specifically because this is a vast topic. There are so many layers to it. I don't think I could do it justice, and I would probably piss off the people who know something about it and confuse the people who don't. But it did make me wonder, what would I feel confident doing a special outtake episode on? And so soon we'll have a week where we know we can't record a podcast because I'll be traveling, and this will be a good moment to record a special themed episode. So thank you to the person who submitted the idea to do a special outtake on Africa. Unfortunately, we can't do that, but you did inspire us to make a special outtake on something else.
Okay. I thought it would be animal news, but this will be fun, like a special episode. Before I ask you, just a question. You studied political science.
Yes, I did.
On a fairly... Well, there's no other way of saying it, a fairly elitist French school.
I did, yes.
The type of school, no, specifically the school that a lot of French politicians go to as well, national politicians. Or did they go to the one in Paris?
They go to the one
in Strasbourg.
Yeah, they do Paris. I went to Strasbourg.
But the fact that you point that out is, I think, part of the elitism thing.
The Minister for Justice, Didier Migaud, he went to the one in Lyon.
Ooh,
so
it's
not all
school.
Paris. It's not
Local
all
school.
Paris.
Man went to local elitist school. My question is actually on this. So the special episode on France, political science. I assume you had quite a lot of history of France in Africa at school.
Yeah.
Is that why you say you wouldn't be able to do it justice? Because it's too in depth, maybe?
Yeah, I think there's like entire books written about this, and they're still not going in depth enough. In Sciences Po, so that's the school I did, Sciences Po in Strasbourg, we'd have like a focus on three main areas. That was law, economics, and history. And like these three together give us a good overview of political science. And so there was one class called political science, but it wasn't actually the main one. Like the main ones were law, economics, and history. That's where you'd have so much focus. So yes, there is a history focus. I got a view into it, but it's one of these topics where you learn a little bit and you know just enough to know that you know nothing.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have an idea for a team yet then on that special episode?
Yeah, I've been thinking, and one issue I think people don't realize how important it is in France is the outsized influence that some of France's top billionaires have on politics. I've ranted a lot against, fairly rich people on this podcast, mostly on they should pay more taxes, but it's not just that, and so I think it's worth talking about a few of them.
That sounds actually quite interesting. Yeah. Well, that's a wrap up for this week then. No animal news, but still fun.
À la semaine prochaine.
Hey. Bye.